Hello, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live with me, Shyam Sadasivan. And today I'm talking about being inclusive and growing careers in a highly polarized world with the one and only Chandra Dureswamy, someone who's kind of opened my eyes to many things that I was not aware of. Had a lot of wonderful conversations with him before about diversity, inclusion, how it kind of matters at the workplace. And I'm super excited to have him here with me today, joining you for a conversation around how to grow your career inclusively in a polarized age. So, without much further ado, let's hit it. Hi, Chandra.
Hi,
Hello. You're
Sham. Good
live. You're
evening.
live.
Are you able to
Hey.
hear me well?
Yes. It's loud and clear.
Thank
And
you.
you're looking all fresh and set for our conversation. Excellent. Wonderful to have you.
The topic of inclusion always brings happiness to me and it lights
I
up my
know.
mind.
Oh my goodness, it's very apparent, very apparent. I can't wait to have this conversation. Actually, we've been kind of going back and forth about this for a while now, and my ideas in my head have just been exploding. So I'm just going to try and somehow figure out how to make this a conversation that is interesting to both you, me, and to our lovely guests, folks. If you're here with us, say hello in the comments. We'd love to know who's here with us, and of course, anytime tell us what you want us to talk about and we will. Chandra, I'm just going to get right to it. And
Absolutely.
I told people about the 4-year anniversary of that landmark Supreme Court judgment. So to tell us first, I mean, why was it a landmark 4 years ago? What did it do really? And 4 years on, where are we vis-a-vis that judgment?
Great question. Great conversation starter for the evening. Um, for close to 150 years, we had this Indian Penal Code, Section 377 in the Indian Penal Code. That's pretty much says homosexuality is unnatural and anybody who engages in a homosexual act or anybody who's accused of being a homosexual, you don't even have to engage in an act in India, right? Anybody can be thrown into jail for any particular reason. I mean, sometimes no reason needed as well. So somebody could just accuse you of being homosexual, you could be jailed up to 10 years. Somebody's career, somebody's life can be ruined just by calling them a homosexual. A lot of people were constantly living under fear.
Hmm.
Living under fear is not something, imagine. I mean, for example, for those people wondering how does it feel, think about those days when we were in lockdown during COVID.
Hmm.
None of us were allowed to go out of the house. We don't know what was going to happen to us next morning. Vaccines were far away. We don't know how long we were going to be locked up. And how did people feel? I mean, we felt depressed. There was no hope in life. That's exactly how homosexuals felt in this country for close to 150 years, because there was a Victorian uh, code of conduct that was brought into the country, slapped on us.
Right.
Not just us, many of the Commonwealth nations had this.
Hmm.
But then we eventually inspired Singapore. I'm quite happy. India did this 4 years ago, and Singapore, on their national day, recently announced that they're considering to remove homosexuality not being illegal.
So it still is in Singapore today.
It is, but then they're considering to remove it.
Hmm. Right.
And then the other day in Iran, right, 2 days back, couple of days back, I saw this article online. Iran doesn't accept homosexuality, so they have decided to hang two lesbian activists. So the lot of crimes that are still happening across the
Yes.
world,
Yes.
out of 196 countries in the world, 126 of them have legalized homosexuality. So which means you still have 76 countries where
Hmm.
homosexuality is still considered illegal.
And what has happened
And
since? Sorry, go on.
no, coming to answer the second part of your question, right? What has
Yes.
really happened in the last 4 years?
Uh-huh.
Nothing much has happened in the last 4 years. If you look at the verdict, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court gave on 6th of September 2018, they clearly laid out to-do list for the government of India.
Yeah.
None of that has been even touched. I won't even say completed, but none of that has been touched. Government doesn't even want to touch that.
Like what, Chandra? Could you tell us what's on that list?
They really wanted the government of India to raise awareness, public awareness
Yeah.
on homosexuality being natural, homosexuality not being a crime. Still, a lot of police continue to treat LGBT people as
Mm-hmm.
criminals. Couple of
Mm-hmm.
days ago, what happened to the Tweet Foundation founder? Because a policeman's child wanted to transition from one gender to another gender, left home, and took refuge with Tweet Foundation. But then, when they found out where the person was hidden, the police came and arrested the Tweet Foundation founder, and then they were put in jail. But then eventually
Mm.
they got out. But then, the police brutality continued to harass and discriminate and single out LGBT people.
Right.
Couple of other things. Nothing much has happened on the policy front, right? LGBT people can't serve in army.
Mm-hmm.
Rights to marry not available. Gay marriages are not legalized in India. We can't adopt. There's no research that said gay parents, are inferior to straight parents. There's no opportunity for surrogacy as well to start a family. That is on the family part.
Mm-hmm.
Today, joint ownership of property. Me and my partner decide to buy a house together. There's no, we can't jointly own a piece of property. Adding another person's, my partner's name as a nominee on my insurance or PF documents is impossible. Recently, Supreme Court again came down and said, let's relook the definition of family. Queer people who are living in together are also considered a family. So it is about time that we redefine what a
It is.
family is
It is indeed.
and we try to be inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
For corporates, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
still far away from what they need to do. We have a
Mm-hmm.
few organizations that have taken strides. They've started to make some inclusive steps, but
Mm-hmm.
then it is far away for rest of the corporates. They
Yeah.
still don't recruit diverse candidates. They
Mm-hmm.
still don't make products and services for a diverse set of audience.
Yes.
Next, coming to the medical fraternity, right? Conversion therapy is still practiced in India.
Mm-hmm.
Tamil Nadu is the only state that banned conversion therapy last year, which is considered harmful and detrimental to a person's physical and mental health. But
Could you
then,
elaborate on what conversion therapy is? Yeah.
conversion therapy, somebody who wants to transition from one gender or
Mm-hmm.
one sexuality to another, right? For example, I'm born a gay person, a gay man. My parents decide, okay, you need to go through conversion therapy. You need to become straight.
Right.
The same conversion therapy can be extended to gender as well. There are
Yes.
some people who go through gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you're putting them through conversion therapy. There's this beautiful movie out there, Game Erased,
Mm-hmm.
A Boy Erased, Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe. It's exactly a story of an Australian youngster, a teenager, who's pushed into conversion therapy by their parents. So those of you who have not watched that movie, check out the OTT platform.
Sure.
It's a,
Definitely.
it's
Yes.
it's an amazing platform. It's an amazing movie to watch. So
Could you tell us the
homosexuality
name
in the
again?
medic
Could you tell us the
Boy
name again? I'll put it
Erased,
in the comments. Hmm?
BoyErased.
Let it. I'll put it in the comments. Thank you. Yes.
In the medical fraternity as well, right? They still consider homosexuality to be a disorder. 1973, a couple of years before I was born, the American Psychiatric Association said homosexuality is not a disorder. But
Mm.
then it took Indian Psychiatric Association or Indian Medical Association 43 years, 45 years, honestly, until 2018, they never said anything. A lot of these medical textbooks also have to be rewritten. Courts have been pulling up the Medical Council of India, asking them to rewrite their medical curriculum and textbook so that they're very, very inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
The last is nothing much has changed. Inclusion
Nothing has
starts at
changed.
home, and it
Yes.
is definitely a wake up call for parents and parents to be to educate themselves on gender and sexuality.
Indeed.
If you don't raise an inclusive family or a child or children, the children will ensure they raise an inclusive parent.
They sure are. Yes,
And
I couldn't agree more. Mm.
lastly, I'd like to put another point. Only when every citizen in the country has
Yeah,
the same rights, has equal rights, and feels safe,
yeah,
we've achieved real freedom.
indeed, indeed. Thank you for outlining that for us. There's so much there that I didn't know myself, to be honest, and I'm sure this is being useful for our guests. Folks, if you've just joined us, please do tell us in the chat. Say hi in the chat so we know, who's here with us. And if you have any questions for Chandra and myself, please let us know. We're talking about. We just dove right into quite a heavy topic, actually, Chandra. Thanks for kind of outlining it for us. And it is both endearing to know that something has changed, but then again, there is a sense of hope that we need, and anticipation that a lot more has to come. There are so many angles in which I want to take this conversation, but I'm going to do one bit and then I'll come to the kind of corporate career angle, which is the one I'm really interested in diving into with you. The one that I want to make a quick detour or quick stop on is the family angle that you said. So, a couple of things I want to share. Diversity is much more than gender, right? Diversity has so many aspects to gender, to diversity. One of our favorite comedians and somebody we watch quite a lot is Trevor Noah, and he brings a lot of wonderful humor and real candid ideas into this. So my kids and I watch his comedy, and he talks about apartheid and moving to America and all of those things. And he just had Elliot Page as a guest. Elliot Page was Ellen Page, and she won a lot of awards as a Hollywood actor. And Elliot Page has now come out of the movie, and we were watching that interview, and then my son came and said, "So, can you explain this to me?" And I could sense there's a sense of curiosity, and I think that is the only thing I can do as a parent, really create a sense of curiosity about the idea. I mean, what else can I do? They're going to grow up and be their own kind of people, but then there's a sense of curiosity and interest, because I think the world is reasonably congruent right now. What's happening at home, what's happening outside, there's a sense of congruence. There's a meeting of minds rather than the world is this way and we live our lives that way. So I'm very, very pleased about that. And I think the kids are getting things at home and things from outside that are influencing them, and hopefully they'll be as inclusive as we'd like ourselves and them to be. So that's the quick detour. Thank you. um, and yes, they are training us to be more inclusive as well. Sometimes my son comes and says, "Daddy, don't say that, that's not a nice thing to say." And I like, yeah, that's true, actually. I won't say what I said, though. uh, so coming back to career, so let's go to career. Diversity, inclusion, I mean, in India, we are diverse in so many different ways. And I think we talk about language, gender, background, experience, and I know you have a very diverse experience in different fields and sectors and so on. Tell us about inclusion. I mean, what does it really mean when we say is it like a can be seen to be quite a fluffy word? I mean, diversity is apparent, a lot of diversity is apparent, right? Background, race, caste, language. A lot of diversity is not apparent, like experience, backgrounds, and all of that. But what is inclusion really?
Imagine you have 20 different people from diverse backgrounds in the workplace,
Hmm.
and you decide to send all 20 of them a meeting invite and say, "Hey, let's come to the conference room, let's have a conversation."
Okay.
That is inclusion,
Mm,
recognizing that these people are diverse and we need to have a conversation and
mm,
including them as a part of your meeting. That is inclusion.
mm.
You go one step beyond and ensure everybody in the room gets an opportunity to speak.
Right.
Then you also create a sense of belongingness for people.
Hmm.
They feel safe, they feel heard,
Hmm.
they feel included, and then you've given them the opportunity to collaborate as well. So this is what diversity versus what inclusion is.
Mm.
Unfortunately, what has happened is, we've this industrial revolution, right? It predominantly focused only on efficiency. They focused on the throughput or the output,
True.
and they had such an industrialized approach to everything. It is not just the product, also the people who came in. You have to
Mhm.
dress up in uniforms, you have to conduct yourself in this way. And it is one size fits all.
Yep.
They don't realize that just like you make different products, your people also come in various shapes and sizes.
We do, don't we? Yes. Yes, indeed. Indeed. So, kind of preparing for the fact that we are different and behaving accordingly. One of the other things that people keep asking me is difference between equality and equity. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, imagine, you all can do a Google on equality and equity, and you will get a very, very interesting, what should I say, cartoon.
Yeah.
I- Imagine there are three people of varying heights.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
all of you are given an opportunity to watch a match. But then
Okay.
there's a fence in front of you.
Okay. So you have to look over it. Yeah.
Exactly. The shot,
Okay.
and then all of you are given a podium or probably
A box or something.
an
Yeah.
elevated platform to stand on and look at the match. But then the shortest person is not able to look beyond the fence, only able to look at the fence.
Even
So
with
by
the box. Yeah.
even with the box.
Yes.
So if imagine that you want the other person to enjoy the match as well, the shortest person. So you
Yes.
try and give the person not the same box, but then a box of a different height, much taller, so that the person
Very
can view
nice.
the match. And that is
Yes.
the difference between equality and equity.
Yes. Yes. Got it. Got it. So it's basically equality, not of resource, of outcome. Everybody does not
Exactly.
get the same box. Everybody gets to see the match. So
Exactly.
equity is actually equality of outcome. Everybody gets to be their best in the workplace. That's what we would say, that we are providing an environment where everybody is able to be their best, right? And that is the equality of outcome. Everyone can express themselves, right? And the ideas of psychological safety and so on. Got it. So what's happening in the corporate world right now? I mean, I did talk about being a polarized world. So I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of ways in which you see the world. I see the world becoming polarized in so many ways. Everything has got to be right or wrong. Even recently, there's been some. I mean, there's always things that come up on social media as being, polarized, and people almost feel like they have to take a stand. And I find inclusion the almost antithesis of that. Why should I always go for black and white? Why can't I thrive in the middle? So what's the problem with that? I mean, that's what keeps running through my head. Would love to know what you think of why the world is so polarized, and what we can kind of how we can bring the inclusion angle into it.
See, today, if you look at the diversity, right, at the workplace, it really doesn't represent the diversity we have as a nation. You've already talked about the language, you talked about the region, you've talked about the male female ratio, so on and so forth. There's just enormous diversity when we step out of our workplace. But when we
Yes.
go into the workplace, right, all of us are made to look uniform. There's very little diversity that you see. And as people, right, we all carry different identities. It could be racial identity, it could be a religious identity, faith based identity, gender is an identity, sexuality, belief. The symbols that I wear, the vibhuti that I have on my forehead is also another identity. I feel confident enough to wear my identity, come to work, but then not a lot of people feel confident. This is like a set of cards, right? Your identity is like a set of cards. You're holding the pack very close to your chest. You don't want to
Mhm.
reveal the cards. Every time you feel safe, you find somebody within your own clan, birds of same feather, you try and reveal that card a little bit,
Yes, little by little. Yeah.
little
Yeah.
by little. So that happens in every group, right? So
Mm.
today, if you look at the diversity that we have in the workplace, right? For example, the population of India is 48% women.
Mm.
Do we see the same representation in the workplace? Do we see the same representation in the Indian parliament?
Mm.
You have policymakers who are
Mm.
trying to, a bunch of men who are trying to decide what policies women should have.
Should have. Yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely.
how fair is this?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Very important statistics World Bank has shared. The female labor participation in India fell to 20% in 2019 from 26% in 20
It's
in
reducing.
25.
Yes.
25 exactly, and it was
It is.
31% in 1983.
Yes.
So there's been a consistent drop
Hmm. I
in
wonder
women.
why. I've been following that. I still don't understand why though. Yeah, very
I mean,
interesting.
irrespective of more women joining, colleges, getting more educated, but then they
Yeah,
just don't get into the workplace. There
yeah.
are a lot of reasons for it because the workplace is male dominated. There's a pay parity at
Hmm.
the workplace,
Hmm.
career advancement opportunities, the way
Hmm.
women are treated.
Hmm.
Women feel a lot of discrimination in the workplace as well, not just
Yeah.
men.
Hmm.
Another group of people, 8 to 10% of any population comprise of LGBT people, right?
Yeah.
Is it the same at the workplace? Do we really see these LGBT people out and about at the workplace?
Hmm.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Two
Right.
third
Right.
of two-third of LGBT people report homophobic comments.
Yeah.
They also report harassment.
Hmm.
I'm going to now look at the trans people, right? We see many of them languishing at traffic lights and toll booths.
Indeed.
96% of transgenders are denied jobs. More than
Yes.
60% of them don't even complete their school education. As
Hmm.
a result, they're being pushed into either low paying jobs or undignified work for livelihood.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Next, I will come to the next population, people with disabilities.
Yes.
There are 3 crore people with disabilities in India.
Hmm.
How many disabled people do we really see at the workplace?
Yeah.
Out of 3 crore people, right, only 1.3 crore are employable.
Hmm.
Out of that, only 34 lakh of them are actually employed.
Hmm.
Government of India is actually one of the largest employers
Yes.
of
Yes. Yes. Yes.
PWDs. There's definitely something for corporate India to learn from government of India. How are they doing it? How can we improve?
How they how they helping them actually get employed. There was one thing that I saw when you speak about disabilities. When I lived in the West, I mean, there's ramps everywhere legally in buses everywhere. We rarely see that in India, but there's this organization I think called Rampit. I think they install ramps, metal ramps in shops. I've seen them on Church Street in Bangalore quite a lot, and I'm
Mhm.
sure they are in many other places. So you don't have to build an entire kind of concrete structure. They just kind of go and snap it onto your steps basically and provide a ramp, permanent ramp, metal ramp, but then you just come can kind of add it, slap it onto your construction there. I think that's such a wonderful idea, right? I mean, so beautifully done.
And another population that I want to touch upon is also the neurodivergent population. Today, a lot of corporates have starting to use this word neurodivergent, etc.
Yes.
Do you know that 10 to 20% of the world population is neurodivergent?
And what does that mean, Chandra? And it would be great to kind of understand it from a workplace perspective as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, and there's even statistics out there saying one in every four CEOs are dyslexic.
Hmm.
Dyslexia is actually in the
I've
neuro
also. Hmm.
divergent spectrum, just like how sexuality is a spectrum, right? This is also a spectrum. So you have
Yes.
all the way from autism, Asperger's, ADHD,
It's a long.
etc., etc., dyslexic. It is a spectrum. So some of these neurodivergent people are super intelligent.
Hmm. Hmm. Almost savants, actually. Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. See, just like how we have this bell curve at work, right?
Yes,
If you
indeed.
fall in the middle, you're taken into the workplace. If you're on either side,
So,
right, they probably think there's something wrong with you and they leave you out.
right. No, great point you make about it being a spectrum because autism and everything is on a spectrum uh, across a range of possibilities, right? And that's what I'm also struggling to kind of understand because we tend to see things as polarized. You're either autistic or you're not, but that's not how autism works. You're on a spectrum. You're either disabled or you're not, but you may be able to do certain things but you can't. So why are we polarized like that? Why do we tend to see things in black and white? And what can we
See,
do to kind of understand where they are and we can create an equitable workplace?
see, you know what? If you look at the switch that we have at home, right, there are only two
Yeah,
stages for the switch. It's either on or off.
that's right.
But then you'll have to understand that that is not how humans are. We have
No.
so many in between stages.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks gender, sexuality, etc., etc. They're all binary,
Yep.
but in real life, they're all non-binary. They could be more than one state.
Yes.
Until a few years, right? The child doesn't even know if they're male or female. The entire concept of gender is actually a society created one, and parents feed that gender into the child like food.
Right.
You say, oh, if it's a girl child, you start painting everything in pink, you put fairies and flowers. If it's a boy, then you have all these superheroes at home, everything is in blue. And I'm like, who came up with this color code?
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed, indeed. There's so
and
many things to our identity that, for example, religion. I'm not a. Some people say practicing Hindu. I don't know what that means, but I'm very spiritual, but I'm not very practicing in that sense. And someone asked me to fill out a piece of paper. Once I was filling out a form, and religion was in there, and I didn't know why. And tried to find out, and it turns out that it has to do with something to do with inheritance law, because Hindu inheritance is different to other religion inheritance laws. So there was a reason for it. But then what if you do not put a religion? I still don't know the answer. I have to figure it out. But then there are so many aspects to our identity that is a polarized. You have to be slotted in, don't you? Right? And if you don't get
absolutely.
slotted in, the world doesn't really understand.
See, when they do the entire census exercise in the nation, right? Last time when they came around, I was home when when the government staff came around, wanted to know who was there at home, etc., etc. So there was all these questions about religion, faith, all of that. We decided we will not answer that question, and we
Mm,
will not answer anything about caste as well. Because if you look at the violence, the hatred that's happening in the country, right? It is divided along the caste lines, along the religious lines. And I said, I don't want to add another data point to that and fuel this.
mm,
So I decided to stay away from it, just stay out of it. Just like you said, you didn't know what to answer. I said, I don't want to answer.
mm.
And they took no for an answer as well. I said, I don't have a religion. You've had people actually, go to court and said, you know what? I don't have a gender. And court has said, it's okay, you don't have a gender as well. This has happened in India. And there are people who've clearly taken their religion off their records as well.
Yes, yes, they have. Yeah, need to figure that out.
And
Shall we like take a look at a few
absolutely
of the comments? I've got Balaji talking about a story. Actually, would love to read this out. Balaji says, this morning I met a person from the trans community begging on the MRTS, which is the railway system in Chennai. If I know that right. I asked the person if going to a full-time job, if provided an opportunity, is an option. The response was yes. How do I help that person get a job or career?
fantastic. Great question, Balaji. I'm so
Thanks,
thankful you did approach this person, have a conversation. A lot of us continue to be bystanders. Oh, why should I even talk to this person? But you, as an ally, reached out to them. That sends a very important message. There's something you can look up this organization by name Periphery, perifrry.com. They're based in Chennai. You can connect with Neelam Jain, who's one of the founders. You can write to them as well, or if you can write to me, I can put you in touch with them. They do a kind of prep school for trans talent, and ensure they get placed in corporates. So definitely there's a huge opportunity for trans people, and corporates are slowly opening their doors. You can also get in touch with Solidarity Foundation. If the person's based in Bangalore, Solidarity Foundation also can help them.
And isn't this amazing? Lata Nair has offered to help. Balaji, please, if you can see in the comments, you can see Lata's
Yeah,
profile. Please get in touch. She says, if I can be of some help, please contact Periphery. Well, of course, who helps upskill and help get employment. Lata, thank you so much. It's amazing. Amazing to see things happening live. Thank you. Lovely. Um, right. What
Sham,
else
I
do we
haven't
have?
answered the second part of your question.
What was that? I forgot. What did I ask you?
Um, the first part was on the diversity. Second part of it was more on inclusion. You're like, does diversity get does it get transferred, and does it do people feel included at the workplace? There's a
Yeah.
new report that I actually read last night, right? This was done by Capgemini Research Institute, which says 84% of all technology employees acknowledge that their products are not inclusive. Isn't that
Okay.
fascinating?
Hmm.
84% of technology employees saying that their products are not inclusive.
Hmm.
Last week, or a couple of weeks back, when you had this conversation on AI and women, right?
With Ranjani
You
Money.
had
Yeah.
shared this piece of
Yeah.
information saying that, in the auto industry, seat belts, when they were designed, they never took women into account. You know what is even crash tests that they do, dummies,
They do not.
is
Yeah.
based on average male, and they don't get women. I mean, does it mean that women's safety is not important?
Yeah.
And
That's
you
right.
also
That's
brought
right.
another point that day. I was keenly listening to it, saying that the office temperature, right, is being
Yes.
set the
It's different.
metabolic resting rate of an average man. And you find a lot of women at the workplace walking in, even on a summer day, walking carrying sweaters around. I'm like, what's wrong? I mean, am I feeling different? But then they told me they feel very cold at the workplace.
Yes, indeed.
Another another
Totally right.
example that I'd like to share is here about smartphones that we all use, right?
Yes.
They found out that the average smartphone size is 5.5 inches now.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the average hand size of a male, this 5.5 inches is very easy to use.
Mm-hmm.
But if you consider the average palm size of a woman, this is
Oh,
too
how
big.
fascinating.
They really can't use the phone with a
Fascinating.
single hand.
How fascinating. I mean, I have the same discussion at home because our kitchen cabinets are all wrong because my wife finds it hard to reach the very top. It's a
Mhm.
very interesting conversation we always have at home. Can I tie this back to the polarization point, right? Where we tend to see things as black and white. So the point here is this, and tell me, please, Chandra, if I've understood this correctly. Okay.
Yep.
So let's say 5.5 is okay for men, and let's say around 4.5. I don't know what a number is, say four is appropriate. And again, we are grossly generalizing here. But let us suppose there are two numbers, one for men, one for women, which kind of makes sense. Now, the polarization happens that it either has to be this or has to be that. And inclusion is and equity is about saying men should get this and women should get that. It is about taking the effort to acknowledge that and offer them that choice. Would that be right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
Honestly, you know, for example, clothes that are being made, right?
Yes.
Do they even consider people with disabilities? They
Mm.
have shirts with buttons.
Mm.
What if a person doesn't have a hand
Mm.
or doesn't have fingers? How will the
Mm.
person be able to button?
Mm.
There was
Mm.
one company that actually came up with shirts with Velcro,
Mm.
or some of them even did a magnetic strip.
Yes.
So there's
Wow.
so much difficulty
Unbelievable.
until
Unbelievable.
unless,
Yeah.
yeah, this is because we don't have diverse teams developing these products.
Yeah. Think
It's
about it
just
from that
one,
perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, it's just one set of people trying to develop these products for one set of audience.
Yes, and then kind of distributing it to everybody else, and that sets the notion that that is what it is supposed to be. This is how, like, left-handers, at least in my generation, used to be asked to kind of turn into right-handers because the system was set up like that, and they were encouraged to be like that. Um, can we connect it now to careers, Chandra? Let's make a solid
Absolutely.
connection to workplace and careers. I mean, suppose I'm working in a corporate job, in high tech or whatever field it is. I mean, why should this matter to me? Not from an organizational perspective, from a personal perspective. If I was to say, how does all of this matter to me? I'm just trying to make a living and grow my career and be successful. How would you kind of connect the dots to somebody who says that?
Absolutely. Before I answer this question, I would like to share a couple of data points from the Boston Consulting report that describe the future of workplace.
Hmm.
This report was published in 2020. Yeah.
Okay.
And it
Hmm.
gave a very refreshing picture of future of work and what organizations need to do to stay relevant. Not just organizations, but also future leaders. Let's look at it that way. Organizations are nothing but filled with people at the end of the day. The report says by 2030, 70% of working population will comprise of Gen Zs and millennials. 70%. It's not
Yeah.
even the current generational diversity that we see. it is skewed towards millennials and Gen Zs. Their
Yeah.
motivations are very different from the current generation.
Yes.
And IDE, inclusion, diversity, and equity, play a very key factor when these people choose their employer or a brand. In that report, they found out that 65% of them said ID is a key factor when they evaluate an employer.
Right.
And
So they want to feel
75%,
included. I mean,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, when I joined my current employer as well, right? I evaluated them from that point of view. I'm not a
Yeah.
Gen Z, I'm not a millennial, but then still I use the same lens to evaluate.
Mm.
75% of full-time employees in current workplace said they would leave their organization and go join a more inclusive, welcoming brand.
Yes.
So, which means if brands and organizations aren't inclusive, they will fail to provide career opportunities, retain best talent, and put out products for larger audience. Not just
Got
their
it.
brand, eventually their products will also become irrelevant.
Got it.
So, now coming to the career part of it, right? See, careers are built based on how you connect with people,
Mm-hmm.
how you connect with employees, how you connect with customers, how you
What a
connect with
fantastic point.
suppliers,
Yes, you're
right?
right there. Mm-hmm.
If you are not inclusive, and if you make somebody in your customer organization feel excluded because you're polarized, you have a very different view, you tend to lose business, your organization tends to lose business.
Yes. Yes.
Nobody thinks about that. Some
No.
studies have been done. They found out that LGBT inclusive organizations have reported 31% higher sales. This could be from multiple reasons. When your employees feel included and engaged, consider the Maslow's pyramid. When there's psychological safety, right, they're able to get to the next level. They're able to perform. They're able to reach the self actualization stage.
Yes.
That they're able to collaborate. They're able to come out of their shell. They're able to create innovative products. All of this push your sales number high. You're also able to connect to new buying centers in customer organizations
Yeah.
that nobody think about, right? Then
No.
research also
It's almost like a 22nd, 21st century soft skill, or
exactly.
just like like people have been talking about communication and all of that. It's literally a superpower today, I think.
E-
Mm.
exactly. And if you look at what leaders are measured against, right, in their corporate jobs, they're measured for the sales. Have they been able to grow sales?
Hard numbers. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. What is the productivity? Have they been able to make their employees more productive?
Yeah.
How innovative they are?
Yeah.
Are they able to grow their stock price compared
Yes.
to their competitors?
Yes.
These are these are the four parameters. And inclusion is actually a biggest lever that a lot of
Yeah.
organizations fail to use to create this impact.
Yeah.
LGBT inclusive organizations reported 31% more sales, 37% higher productivity, 8 to 10% more patents were being churned out, 5% higher growth in stock price over organizations that were not inclusive.
There's a real tangible difference here. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's a
So,
huge business benefit and an upside that is there.
so when you said, large proportion of millennials and Gen Zers want to work in an inclusive workplace, it's not to say that earlier we didn't. We probably didn't know how to express it. If I could go back 20 years ago, and then you ask a 20-year-old, 25-year-old Sham, do you want to work in an inclusive organization? I wouldn't know what you were talking about. You know, I think the language has developed now, so people are able to say that it is something that I like. Those days, I don't think I would have even understood what that meant. I think, yeah.
Sham,
You
there's so
spoke
much of
about.
heteronormativity and heterosexism that is in the society that needs to be kept in check.
Mm,
For example, a lot of policies that you see right at the workplace, not a lot
yeah,
of organizations have inclusive policies. They are defined by certain people for certain people, just like
mm,
our laws in the country. So when
Yes.
you get more people to participate, be much more inclusive, and when you get people to speak up, then you try to get more voices heard, then you have an organization that is much more inclusive.
Hmm. Neha is giving us an interesting tidbit here. Here, a new term for Gen Z, avid, approaching adulthood, video driven influencer aware, digitally native consumers. Wow, I have never heard this. I realize the influencers reflect diversity. They will be very conscious of their choices when they enter the workforce. Wow, Neha, thank you. I did not know this at all, but it makes so much sense. Wow. Video driven for sure. Yes, please, Chandra.
So, I mean, picking up on what Neha said, right? Somewhere I read even calling somebody a digital native, right, is microaggression.
Interesting. Tell us what microaggressions are.
For example, I mean, there are multiple ways of looking at microaggression, right? A woman who drives a car, I've said this 20 years ago, and I repent when I learned microaggression. I'm like, I really wanted to go back and say sorry to this person. I was following my aunt in New Jersey. She was driving. I was following her in another car. We parked for lunch, and I said, "Oh my God, you drive so well."
Mm, yeah, it's a compliment, but then, yep. Mm, yeah,
So
the way it is said, yep. Oh,
exactly,
Your English is so good.
exactly. Your English is so good.
That's a microaggression. So you did not expect my English to be that good. I've been on both sides of that, by the way. Yeah. Mm,
But then I've had people tell me, "You really cook well."
yes.
I
And
tell
by the
them,
way, folks,
cooking,
he really does. Okay. Yeah. Mm.
Sham, these are all life skills, right? Cooking,
Yes.
driving, etc.
Yes.
The
Yes.
financial management,
Right.
etc.
Right.
These are all life
Okay.
skills. It doesn't have to belong to any particular gender.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes when you use all these markers and you drive, I mean, there's a particular marginalized community and you think you're appreciating them. Sometimes
Yeah.
what you say, some of these appreciations are nothing but pure microaggressions.
Yes, yes. Mosquito bites, thousand. So microaggressions are kind of once you hear it, you kind of brush it off twice. Okay, 100 times, 50, 100,000 times. You're like every day you got to face it, and all marginalized communities face it all the time. They hear things that are almost normalized in natural language, but they're not acceptable when someone has to hear it day in day out a million times, like 1,000 paper cuts or 1,000 mosquito bites. It's really painful in the end.
Thanks for bringing up the mosquito bite. I'm going to share a very interesting discussion that we had at work today.
Okay.
Again, a very interesting conversation on IND. And
Yeah.
suddenly, one of my colleagues this afternoon said, "You know what? I went and interviewed this person on the shop floor, and I
Yeah.
asked her, don't you think using the word man hours is not inclusive? And are you comfortable when the term man hours is used?"
Yeah.
And she responded, "It seems I don't care. It's okay. It's man hours. That's how we've been brought up. So this is fine." So then he asked me, he said, "What do you think of this response?" I said, "See, culturally, you will have to take some of these into account. Just
Mhm.
because there are some people who are very sensitive in the West to all this, you can't say, we can't really use all of that. You'll have to
Yeah.
see what works for your audience. For
I
example, we get bitten by a million mosquitoes in India. So we just swat the mosquito and life goes on. But
carry on.
probably for a Western person, right, there's one mosquito bite, they would develop a rash. I said, consider this mosquito bite to inclusive language. I said, we have all developed a thick skin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's highly contextual, the whole thing, because if you say to me, too many mosquito bites, I'll say just buy another Odomos or whatever. But it's very,
Exactly.
not to make fun of the situation for somebody else where it is much more severe, it could lead to, a skin rash or whatever. So the question here is, are you curious enough to understand implications? So if actually people ask me, I do a lot of inclusion training, as you know, Chandra. And, people ask me, is it okay to say something in a group? And I'm like, depends on the group, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Right, if you all agree, like for example, language is something, for example, this is a very career workplace issue. I have seen groups forming cliques based on their native language. There'll be, I've seen like a Malayalam crowd or a Telugu crowd or a Tamil crowd, and again, there's nothing wrong about having a set of friends at work or whatever. But it shouldn't be that you lapse into your native language in a team meeting. That is completely inappropriate and unacceptable, because you've chosen that you will all speak in a language everyone can understand, and you're having a meeting with everybody is involved. You're having lunch with a bunch of friends, yeah, feel free, right? So it's very contextual. So the inclusion here is all about being extremely aware of who is in there, what the context and what the impact. And as they say, intention is not impact. Intention and impact are very different. You might intend to be nice, but the impact of your words can be quite different, and you may never know that. So staying curious is interesting. Neha's got a point about microaggression. I simultaneously love and dislike the term microaggression, Neha says. While these expand our sensitivity, hence important, one sees expansions of ultra sensitiveness, and we're walking on eggshells. Neha, I was sharing a story with Chandra. Chandra, I'm going to tell them the story of doing
Mhm.
microaggressions, talking about Neha. I do a lot of training on inclusion. And I've realized that again, context, in certain contexts, I've realized that in our eagerness to help showcase the plight of the marginalized, we sometimes marginalize the aggressor or the purported aggressor. So, I've been in training sessions where we've shown videos of possible microaggressions, and the stereotypical aggressor will come up in my sessions and say, "Why are you showing a stereotype of me there as an aggressor? I feel marginalized now." So you got to be extremely careful about what microaggressions you're talking about, how you're presenting them. And this is the reason. The reason is we are highly polarized. We tend to now kind of go this way or that way instead of trying to find that kind of middle inclusive path. Yeah, Chandra.
The other day, over the weekend, I think, or on Monday morning, there was a tweet from Yuval Noah Harari. I
Hmm.
follow him on Twitter, and he just made a statement that, guys, there's a lot of paid media that is available, so please pay for articles and read them. For which I commented. I said, a lot of these media houses are owned by business corporates, conglomerates. I said they have their own tone, they have their own biases, they have their own allegiances. I said
Yes.
there's nothing called a neutral reporting anymore.
Hmm.
Everybody seems to have an opinion, a bias, a point of view.
Hmm.
So sometimes not reading, I think you're probably much safer.
I agree. I don't watch any news, and I know a lot of my friends and acquaintances do not watch any news, and do not trust anything on WhatsApp. You realize that an Olympic medal winning video is from 4 years ago, so kind of we don't trust any of them. Yeah, I've learned to trust only certain sources of information. Like I read the Mint every day, which is my favorite publication. Very practical, very direct, and very cutting. And as far as I can tell, or probably it's my own bias that I like the Mint. Maybe the Mint matches my own biases. I don't know. I haven't gone that far. But yeah, good point about biases. Let's talk about biases. What are biases and how they come into play, because we do a lot of work in corporates. For example, I'm sure also help people understand hiring, promotion decisions. How do you reward people? So many of our biases come into play. So do you want to have a go
Absolutely.
at kind of explaining biases and how it impacts the workplace?
Recruitment bias, for example, we
Yeah.
take this entire, there's a bias called the halo bias.
Yeah.
So somebody is from IIT, IIM, immediately you probably, say, oh, we should pay the person so much more. We should probably have somebody from IIT or IIM for this role. Sometimes we just forget there's so many capable people that are out there. We don't need to create this halo bias.
Correct, correct. Can I just add one thing to that? And
Yes,
this is
please.
basically the distinction between a theory and its corollary. If A then B does not mean if B then A. So basically, we are not saying that if you are from IIT you are not good. That is not what we're saying, and we are not saying that everybody not in IIT is good. None of that is true. The only thing we are saying basically is, have you considered everything else apart from the fact that the person is from IIT or IIM, or just not just IIT, any tier one, right? So it is nothing else. It is basically only saying that, is that sufficient enough for you to make a call? Is there other things you need to look into? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A couple of more biases. Affinity bias. Somebody's from the same college, somebody
Yes.
speaks the same language, somebody's from the same faith. We probably think the person may be better for this job.
Yes.
Probably
Yeah.
similarity bias is another one. Oh, we should only have an engineer do this job, right?
Yes.
This
Yeah.
is all these biases you tend to see
Yeah.
in the recruitment phase. But once the person is already come on board, right, the development phase, etc., there's attribution bias.
Correct.
Attribute someone's success
Future.
to their
Yeah.
luck and somebody's failure to their lack of skills.
Yes. Yeah.
And then there's another bias that I could think of as recency bias. This
Recency is
happens around
amazing.
promotion and
Yeah.
races, using
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
recent
Last
failure
month.
or success,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
right?
why these annual performance reviews are such a mess, because basically they are done on the last few weeks or couple of months. Basically, people forget
E-
unless they keep meticulous
Exactly.
notes and things. Yeah.
And then last is intuition bias, the practice of you relying on your emotional response rather than facts
Mm,
when you make a decision.
yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 I have a model I use with my coaching clients for this. It's called the Enneagram, and it's basically the head, heart, and gut model. Um, and it's basically about ensuring that you are staying true to all aspects of your kind of humanness, right? So the idea is, use your head, which is all we are taught in school, right? Use your head, use your head. So use your head, follow your heart, and listen to your gut. And the idea is that, you got to do all of them. And we are never trained to listen to our gut. We are trained to just ignore it completely and only use our head. So this is where we end up in places where people have used their heads and ended up in jobs making a lot of money, a lot of respect and everything, but terrible health and terrible, and the heart is in something else entirely, and mentally they are down. Or if you use only your heart, you end up doing something, not making any money, not being successful, and then kind of feeling sad about. So it's all about basically finding that sense of balance between head, heart, and gut. And the gut comes into play when the head and heart are in conflict. Swami
Exactly.
Vivekananda said, when head and heart are in conflict, follow the heart. I say, follow the gut.
When I look at a lot of artists, right, you see a painting behind me. When I look at
Yes,
a lot of artists, right, they pour their heart, they pour their emotions, but then a lot of them are not financially successful. And I never bargain with artists. And I'm like, if they say X, I
absolutely.
always end up paying 2X and I buy it. And I'm
Yes,
like, I know
indeed.
difficulty.
Indeed, absolutely, absolutely. This is the biggest debate I keep having with my mother, and we are on the same side, basically saying that, this is something we have not understood. We'll spend like thousands on a big restaurant meal, but we will bargain for like 10 rupees with a vegetable vendor on the streets. What is going on over there? What is the uh, rationale of our behavior there? We still haven't understood. Anyway, folks, if you have more questions with us, we still have quite a few people with us online. Chandra, thanks for staying with us, and I hope you're getting value out of this conversation. If you have any questions for us, we'll be on for another 10 minutes or so. So if you have any questions for us, please pop it in the chat, and very happy to take them. Um, so what do we have left with career? So how do we, I kind of feel that inclusion is a superpower. And the one thing you had mentioned is the Maslow pyramid you mentioned, remember? uh, I've realized this happened literally very recently, Chanda, that Maslow never spoke of it as a pyramid. And let me explain. I've just understood this. I'm want to show off a little bit.
I keep saying this to people, pyramids are only for dead people. It is not for people who are alive.
So Maslow, in his paper, I looked it up. He wrote it in the 60s. I don't remember exactly which year. I pulled up the original paper and found that he never actually referred to the pyramid. So, folks, if you don't know what the Maslow's hierarchy of needs
Hierarchy of
is,
needs.
the bottom hierarchy is basic physiological. In Hindi they say roti kapda makan. In English they say food, shelter, clothing. And then you kind of walk up the hierarchy of what else is there. Your basic needs first: security, you're safe, you're alive, you're safe from the elements. Animals are not going to come and pounce on you, all of that. And then eventually you reach a point where you feel self-actualized, which is basically saying that, I have found my peace. I'm um, what's
The
the
Buddha behind you.
yes. Yeah, my joke is you can either have Sham or the Buddha, never both. So you have found self-actualization as a Buddha. Now, Maslow never spoke of it as a pyramid. The pyramid seems to suggest that you go up, you know, you walk up, to the top. Maslow actually calls it a hierarchy, and a better way of visualizing this is you almost think of it as a ladder. Your right foot is here, your left foot is there, your right hand, left hand, it's all over the place, so you can be both worried about your health, for example. You may have a condition and you're self actualized as well, so you can have both. You can be very successful in your career but then be very worried about money, possibly. You may have other issues. So basically, that this is again my kind of connection to the polarized issue. You're neither here nor there, you're kind of everywhere. And I think a lot of you know thriving in today's world is about understanding that it is not necessary to go this way or that way. It is not necessary to have to choose between right and left or black and white, or whichever way it is. It is necessary to try and understand both sides and find your kind of position along the way.
Sham, here is a question that I'm going to ask you. Have you
Hmm.
had, you have children at home, so have you had conversations around how families can look, about gender and sexuality? Because we always say inclusion starts at home.
Yeah. So I have, and here's one thing I've tried with reasonable success. I try not to bring it up myself. I wait for them to bring it up. As they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I try to have the conversations with them when they seem ready for it. So if my son comes to me with a question, right? I try to do justice to that question. Yeah. So for example, um, my wife used to work. She's not gone back to work after the kids were born. She's now kind of getting ready, gearing up to do something. Now that she feels she has really kind of done the bit to kind of raise them in the initial years, and I'm fully supportive of that. And we're trying to figure out a way to do this. But then my children have only ever seen my wife at home, you know
Mm.
and so their worldview is based on the fact that the woman is at home. Now that is their worldview. I need to be conscious of that. So I'm not trying to fix their worldview. Their worldview is their worldview. Now their worldview as in their family, because the home is the world for a very long time for a child. And then when the child goes and sees something and says, oh, auntie or my friend's mother, she goes to office, oh, that's possible, daddy. I'm like, yeah, of course it's possible. The world is complex and there's many other options. And you know what, your mom used to work too, and now she wants to spend. So they understand the rationale of it. And we've had those conversations for sure. We've had conversations about transformation. Basically, we were watching a TV interview the other day, um, and they were asking me questions. They were watching, and this is why I feel like the world has become congruent. To be honest, my parenting is not that hard because my kids were literally watching. We One of our favorite kind of animated movies is Big Hero 6, which is about a nurse robot, yeah, in a fictional city of San Francisco. It's San Francisco and Tokyo kind of blended. And there's a spin-off animated series with Baymax, which is the nurse character. Nice fluffy white inflatable nurse, basically. So if you get hurt, the nurse comes and helps you. And then there is an entire episode of the show where there's a girl who gets her first period, and Baymax ends up there and helps her through it and gets her pads and all of that. And my kids 12 and 7-year old are watching it. 12-year-old boy, 7-year-old girl, and they're watching it. And then we had a conversation about it, and it was perfectly normal to have that conversation. Now why is it perfectly normal? Because it is normal where they kind of live, and I'm totally aware that me and my wife are going to have this much impact on them over time. My parents keep telling me, we never imagined you'll turn out like this. We all have a kind of influence on the kids, but largely they kind of figure their way out. And I want to meet them where they live. I want to meet them where they are, instead of kind of thrusting my opinion on them. So in that sense we do, but kind of cardinal rules: meet them where they are, have it when they are ready, and wait for them to bring it up in some form. So of course some conversations I'm going to have myself, like birds and bees and all of that.
Mhm.
But certain conversation I try to get them to come to me, so that I know that they feel curious about it, rather than dad just wants to talk about something, ignore him.
Fantastic.
Yes. Parenting, we should do a chat on parenting as well, I guess. That will be an interesting
There are
one.
a lot of nice books that have been written for children on this
Yeah.
topic of gender and sexuality. And we
Ah,
have
nice.
some Indian authors who have also written those.
Very nice.
So yeah, I can share that entire list with
Please do.
you, and I keep sharing that with a lot of parents. And I said, introduce them when they're so young. For
Mm,
example, in your social science textbook was when you first learned this word family, and then you
mm,
had a representation of a man, woman, and a child. I said,
mm.
if that representation was much more inclusive, right? You don't need to have any conversation. You can still have a child with a single parent in the school, and nobody will be picking up on that child,
Yeah.
because we see a lot of bullying that happens in schools.
Yes. Oh, we didn't mention bullying at work because I really want to talk about it. One of the people I follow on LinkedIn has been talking about bullying at work quite a lot, and I was subject to it myself at a really advanced age. So, um, let's see what Dinesh has said, and we will conclude with this comment. I should be able to tell you what's been truncated there because it's not able to show everything. Dinesh says, I moved from India to the UK for my MBA recently, and being a queer millennial kid myself, I've consciously picked up that habit of introducing myself with pronouns during classroom discussions and self introductions. And 7 and 10 times, someone or the other from the audience will ask me, what's this pronoun thing all about? And yes, you heard me right. In the UK itself, yeah. Every time I end up giving them a 10-minute gyan or lecture on pronouns, any strong conversational one-two liners to engrave the importance in their minds. Just curious. Thanks in advance, says Dinesh. So basically, question is any strong conversational short messages to engrave the importance of pronouns, Chandra?
Yeah, you just have to, I think you continue to have that conversation. People should, there is a beautiful 5-minute video that they can watch.
Hmm.
Just type in gender and sexuality 101 on YouTube. Gender and sexuality. News Minute magazine has actually, online newspaper, they've put out a very informative video.
Mhm.
If people watch that video, they will have a lot more clarity on what gender and sexuality means. Unfortunately, this people should be educated in their high schools. We only talk about biological sex, we don't talk about anything else in our biology. If only gender and sexuality was introduced to us, people would not ask this question. There is no short one line answer, but this 5-minute video is something that you can keep in handy and ask them to look at. Next time they would not have that question. And I'm sure this is a material that can be shared with children, it can be shared with your friends, and you can be an ally. Share this around, watch it.
Lovely. And I think that's a great idea. Instead of actually engaging them in a conversation in the moment where they may or may not be ready to receive that information, you say, can you spare 5 minutes whenever you're ready? They'll probably say yes and say, okay, you'll find this link in your email. Whenever you find 5 minutes, check it out and then let's talk. And then that's my point about pulling them into the conversation. And once they are curious, that the quality of that conversation is going to be very high. I believe a lot in pull conversations, not in push.
Mhm.
I do that with my children, with my friends. I don't push anything in my business. It's all pull, pull, pull. Create that sense of curiosity, and hopefully that conversation will be of much higher quality. So, and all the best, Dinesh. What a lovely question. Thank you. I've put the link of the gender sexuality 101 into the comments, Chandra. I just found it on YouTube. So thank you for that recommendation. And I'm
Thank
going
you.
to pull that book list out of you and write a post about it or put it somewhere people can grab. Super. What final thoughts, Chandra, before we go? It's been such a, I mean, we could keep going really, but please, we have to end. So,
See, for those people who watching, inclusion, like what Sham said, right? It is one of those soft skills you definitely need to have it. Cultivate inclusive language, written as well as spoken language. Keep your biases, your heteronormativity, microaggressions in check. Respect individuals and their differences. Everybody, all of us are very different. We're all unique. It is not an assembly line. God did not have, if you believe God's creation, we are not an assembly line creation. All of us are products of so many different constraints. There's so many variables in that equation. Learn to apologize when you make mistakes. Don't be a bystander. You
don't
have
be a
to
bye.
go look up this interesting term called Genovese syndrome.
Ah.
That's a very interesting term. This was coined in the 60s.
Can you
um,
spell it for us, please?
um,
Genevieve?
Genovese syndrome, or you can just look it up as bystander syndrome.
Bystander syndrome.
Exactly. A lot of research has happened on it. YouTube has amazing videos. 9 out of 10 people, when something happens in a group, right? If there are 10 people, something happens to one person, 9 of them, 8 of them will keep quiet. Only one of them will walk
Yeah.
up and say, "What happened to you? Can I help?" We've seen this every day in our lives, in traffic jams, in accidents that happen. We're like, we don't have time, I can't stand blood. But there are so many things that you can do to intervene, help. You can call the ambulance, you can call the police, you can check on them later, you can get their family's number, you can inform them, you can drive them to the hospital. There's so many things that we can do. Don't be a bystander, be an ally. My last point is, if you don't raise inclusive children, they will raise an inclusive parent eventually.
Yes, indeed. Oh, so much gold in there. Don't be a bystander. Can I just speak on that and then conclude our session? Um, uh, Kitty Genovese, that is correct, Neha. I have put in the link on Kitty Genovese. Fantastic idea. And don't be a bystander. I want to end with something that a friend showed me a few years ago, and this was in the context of um, protests against the cutting of trees in Bangalore for various construction, which clearly we are suffering from. Rampant construction is causing all kinds of issues right now in Bangalore. So this thing that Martin Nemola said in the context of the Second World War, I just want to read this and then conclude our session today. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And whenever I say this, I'm getting goosebumps right now because it's about understanding that we are all just part of a whole, right? And knowing that it all kind of comes down to not being a bystander, like you so eloquently put it, Chandra. So, Chandra, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for so much of your time. I know this conversation could go on for days, but I'll kind of draw a line here. Folks, thank you for staying with us. It's been great having you with us, Chandra. I hope to have you again soon.
Sham, it's been such a pleasure. I've always been your fanboy. I will be your fanboy. When you hold these sessions, I always tune in. I come back early from work. I move my call so that I can tune in. There's always a takeaway for me. So I will continue to tune into your sessions, and I'm sure I'll have a lot more takeaways. I'll be a better version of myself tomorrow and in the future.
Thank you, Chandra. On that note, thanks to everybody else, and thank you, Neha. Thank you, Dinesh. Lovely to have all of you. Let's call it a close here today, and I'll meet you in the next live session at some point. Chandra, thank you, and good night.
Bye, everyone.